I'm George Takei. I'm an actor, writer, and an activist. During my teenage years, I discovered that I loved acting. I loved the theater, both the stage, film, and television, and radio. My favorite actor, my heartthrob, was Tab Hunter, a good looking, blonde, blue eyed guy who regularly took his shirt off and he had a great physique. And he had a term contract with Warner Brothers Studio, and he was the lead in almost every new picture. But when I was about 14 or 15, I think it was, a scandal sheet exposed him as being gay, and suddenly he disappeared. Warner's didn't cast him in any movies. They just let the contract run out. And that was an object lesson for me. I knew that there was a social disapproval of gays and lesbians, but you could not aspire to be an actor, to be hired by a producer in Hollywood if it was known that you were gay. And so I put myself in my own self-created, invisible barbed wire prison camp. And the term then was closeted. I was very visible, but I was in a closet. I was visible in other social and justice issues, but I never touched my own situation because I desperately, passionately wanted to be an actor.
How did coming out shift your sense of purpose? And I believe you came out in your late 60s, right?
It was 2005. Because of the activism of the people that were out campaigning for LGBTQ equality, things were starting to happen. In 2003, in Massachusetts, through the Massachusetts State Supreme Court, marriage equality was granted. It was a landmark event. But 2 years later, on the West Coast in California, and this time the people's representatives, the state legislature, the state Senate, and the state assembly passed the marriage equality bill. It was a thrilling experience. Now it was starting to happen, but that bill needed one more signature, the signature of our governor, a movie star, Arnold Schwarzenegger. When he campaigned for the governor's seat, he campaigned by saying, "I'm from Hollywood. I've worked with gays and lesbians. Some of my friends are gays and lesbians," creating the impression that marriage equality was not a problem for him. But when the bill landed on his desk, he vetoed it. The hypocrite. I was outraged because of that campaign. And so it was not just liberation, but it was going out there to campaign against this hypocrite who has no place in the United States governmental system. I didn't want him to be successful in the political arena at all. And that's when I teamed up with the Human Rights Campaign and went on a nationwide speaking tour, speaking against Schwarzenegger's hypocrisy and veto.
We're now in this interesting moment where you have Donald Trump returning to office and making sweeping executive orders that affect the LGBTQ community. You mentioned same-sex marriage in Massachusetts way back when, and I was actually like a cub reporter in Massachusetts at the time, so I followed that story really closely and a lot of the weddings and marriages that happened then. And it is a really interesting moment to be in right now, where you have executive orders, policy changes, and almost more importantly, state-level proposals that could have an impact on same-sex couples. What is that like? Do you feel the atmosphere changing? What are your concerns?
It is changing. And it's because we have that, what I call Klingon in the White House. This authoritarian, self-important, singularly minded person there advocating for the erasure.
But is this different from what you experienced in prior decades, the political atmosphere? I mean, you just talked about Schwarzenegger and sort of how that drew you into the political arena. Does this feel like another time that is better or worse than what you experienced?
It was worse for us as Japanese Americans. It was a lie. They categorized us as enemy alien. We were neither. We were American-born, educated, patriotic Americans, and yet they had this falsity, and they fanned the flames of hatred. The whole country was swept up. My poor parents couldn't even walk down the sidewalk in front of our home without cars roaring down and yelling, "Spy, saboteur, Jap, get out."
Let me pause for a second because I want to break down this story a little bit so people understand kind of what happened to you. You were talking about being a kid, basically, in LA when your family, under this executive order where the government could basically turn all kinds of whole states into military zones where certain people were excluded. And your family was among those 120,000 Japanese Americans
we have the precise number now.
Oh, tell me.
125,181 scholars had been doing the research. And we, at the Japanese American National Museum in Los Angeles, we have this huge tome that lists the name of every person that was rounded up in 1942.
One of the things that's interesting about that moment is it also, obviously you were a child, and today there are also families in detention. What comes to mind when you think of children in this moment who are experiencing this?
I can only use myself because I was a child then. We had very protective parents, and they were exemplars for me. And after the war, too, my father explained to me that the American Constitution is a great form of government. He used to quote to me Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address: "Ours is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people." He said, those are noble words. That's what makes American democracy great. But the weakness of American democracy is also in those words, because people are fallible human beings and they make mistakes. Even great presidents can get swept up in the hysteria of the times, because to Roosevelt, the West Coast of the United States was just like Pearl Harbor. It was open, unprotected, and vulnerable. And here were these people that looked exactly like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. And so he panicked out of ignorance. And this is where teachers and librarians are the pillars of democracy. They can teach them this truth, that people, even great presidents, can be stampeded by hysteria. And that's what we're going through right now. However, we Japanese Americans of our generation in the 70s began a campaign to get an apology and redress. Under Jimmy Carter's leadership, Congress created a commission on getting information on the internment, and they held hearings. And I testified in 1981 at that. And in 1984, they came out with a report stating that the cause of the imprisonment of innocent Japanese Americans was based on three factors. One, war hysteria. Two, racism. And three, the failure of political leadership.
You have a president who is now saying he's carrying out mass deportations because it's popular, or saying that he has popular support for going after undocumented migrants. And it made me think, as I was reading your book, about the fact that a majority of Americans at the time, in the 40s, supported the removal of Japanese Americans. And so, how does your experience of that inform your thinking of the way the president is saying now? That there are at times popular support for these kinds of actions.
The important thing, and my father taught me this when I was a teenager, I have many, many after dinner conversations. Americans need to speak out. We were a small minority and cowed really under the force, the huge tidal wave force against us. And the Japanese Americans, when you have rifles with bayonets pointed at you, and I, as a 5-year-old, I saw a bayonet pointed at my father right at our front door. I was terrified. Now, I'll never forget that. But politicians lie, and people believe that lie because there's hysteria rampant at that time. And in our time today, right now, people got swept up by a lie and elected him. And now people have regrets. The polls are showing that he's very low rated. But it's too late. And he has the power. And he's abusing it. People must speak out.
As we're speaking, the president is going to be visiting Florida. He's going to be visiting a new migrant detention center, which is being called Alligator Alcatraz because it's going to be in the Everglades. And I was reminded of all the stories you've told over the years about how isolated those Japanese American internment camps were. What do you think when you hear our modern government getting excited about the prospect of putting detainees in far or dangerous or isolated places?
That's old hat. We were in the swamps of Arkansas. And actually, to a 5-year-old boy from Southern California, it was an exotic place. Trees, great giant trees that grew out of water. And their roots came out and twisted and went back in and out and in and out like a snake. And my father waded out and cut off one of those sculptural root pieces that came out of the water. He had it mounted, and we had it in our living room. After my father passed, I stopped by and I walked in the living room and it was gone. I said, "Mama, what happened to Daddy's kobu?" We called it a kobu. Daddy's kobu. And she said, "Oh, it reminds me too much of camp. I put it in the garage." And I said, "In the garage? Can I have it if you don't want it?" And she said, take it. And so I have it in my library at home to this day. The swamps reminded me of my parents and the love that they gave us and the guidance that they gave us under horrific circumstances. My father told me about how seeing his 2 boys playing on the dirt road right by the barbed wire fence, and he thought he had so much hope for us, and it just tore him apart that here we were with this unknown future. He didn't know what kind of future his children had. And I'm reminded of that story, too.
One of the things that I have a hard time processing is what it was like for your family and others to come back to their communities. I mean, when you were forcibly removed, you had to leave behind your belongings. And I was reading that sometimes people in those neighborhoods took those belongings. How do you join the community that rejected you again, right? How do you feel American again and come back after you're released?
It wasn't just the loss of our home. I mean, my parents knew it probably would not be there, but it was a nation that still hated us. We weren't behind barbed wires anymore, but they still saw us as the enemy. And their son or their husbands may have been killed by people that looked like us in the Pacific War. And so we were coming back to a hostile America. We couldn't find housing, jobs. Our first home was on Skid Row in downtown LA. And I thought probably the worst part was coming home. Coming home was terrible.
And still hostile. That's the part that, I think in a way I'm surprised by.
Yes, this is America, American history. More people should know that. And that's why I say teachers and librarians are the pillars of our democracy. We need to have an educated electorate so that they can participate with information on the issues of our time. Because there are bulldogs like the one we have now who will just bluster their way through, and people are easily sold. We are fallible human beings, as my father said.
Did it shake your patriotism? Did it shake the patriotism of your parents?
When I became a teenager, I remember the terror, but I wanted to understand why we were incarcerated and subjected to that. So I had many after-dinner conversations with my father, and that's when he talked about the Gettysburg Address. And the important thing is that citizens have the beneficiary of all those ideals, but also the responsibility of citizenship to participate, to speak up, and engage. It was the example of my parents, both my father and mother, that guided us to be activists in the democratic process.
Were you ever angry? And were you ever...
I was raging to understand what my parents had to go through. And I was determined to not only for my parents, but the Civil Rights Campaign, when I started reading about American history and that 400 years of slavery and Jim Crow and what was happening in our times then, the Civil Rights Campaign and Dr. King marching. I did this musical called Fly Blackbird. And in the Vietnam War, I participated. I viscerally was engaged.
I have gotten a chance to look at both books. And the thing that struck me is that your dad was always helping one community understand the other. And I wonder if you're still doing the same thing in telling these stories over and over again.
I'm an American, and America's strength is its diversity. And I was blessed in being cast in Star Trek, which has as its guiding idea, we had an acronym, IDIC, IDIC, infinite diversity in infinite combinations. And so you saw that in the makeup of the cast. And they also, off screen, became good friends of ours, dear friends. And when marriage equality happened, I wanted my wedding party to reflect that. And I asked Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, to be our best man. And I asked Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, to be our matron of honor. But Nichelle balked. She said, I am not a matron. If Walter can be the best man, why can't I be the best lady? I said, of course you are. Will you please be our best lady?
What does it mean to be an American?
It means to me is to be able to have a conversation like this that we're having on the public media. And I am not afraid of what could happen because of this conversation.
And when you think about your personal history, how does that help you understand what it means to be an American?
So many young people of my generation didn't have a father like my father. They don't speak up. They're reluctant to. So many Japanese Americans. We have this Japanese saying: a nail that sticks up is the one that gets hammered down. It's a terrible saying, discouraging young people to speak up. My father urged us to speak up and be actively engaged in society. And so many of my Japanese American generation didn't do that.
What do you think your father would advise in a moment like this, where people might look around and see the courts or state laws or all kinds of powers acting against them?
Well, my father had the president acting against him, the top man in our democracy. But my father informed me, educated me to be an American, to be a true American who understands our American system, our people's democracy. And I'm trying to fulfill that to my father.
You said that if we don't know the unpleasant aspects of American history and we don't learn the lesson those chapters have to teach us, we will repeat them, right? A very famous saying. As you've written this story so many times in different formats, right? Introducing it to different generations at different ages, do you feel heard? Do you feel like Americans are taking away the right lessons from the Japanese American internment story?
I've been doing a lot of promotionals for the book, and I am encouraged when I'm introduced to speak to a large audience of 200, 250 people in a huge auditorium. It's a standing ovation, largely because of my Star Trek notoriety. And it feels good to an actor or a speaker to be greeted like that. But that's a select audience. And I am always mindful that there is a flip side of that. As a matter of fact, both my books, They Called Us Enemy, and my Star Trek book where I talk about the internment, were banned in various schools. But the thing that gives me heart is the Star Trek fans then, and they're very organized and they're a powerful group, they teamed up and took different parts of the issue, and they went to the library board or whatever board that banned it, and they argued so successfully that the book was put back on the shelves. Our democracy reflects the people, and if the people are cowed and silent, it fails. Democracy fails. It's because we have people that are informed and do speak up on the information that they have that our democracy is healthy. And that's where I have hope, even beyond this horrific period that we're living through. We've survived before and will survive again.
I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us and tell us your story.
Thank you very much.